Live streaming is on.
Hello, world. My name is Gerry Fialka. It's May 9, 2021. Thank you to Clinton Ignatoff for helping us. He will be back. And it's a pleasure and an honor to be here with Jello Biafra. Hello, Jello.
Hi.
The first question is, what's the best thing for a human being?
Boy, your audio went out.
You want me to repeat the question? Just say
You're gonna
yes.
have to, yeah, because both your picture and your audio went out.
Okay. The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
Oh, so you asked the same questions of everybody, I guess, or at least to some degree, because I looked at a little of your work there, and my answer to that question would be a question again, exactly, please.
What's the best thing for a human being?
I would say happiness.
Do you more pursue happiness or meaning?
I think both at the same time. I mean, one kind of feeds the other. I mean, I'm not necessarily talking about rah, rah, rah Disney World happiness. I mean, gratification and, the great relief if one of my albums is finally done and it came out, it sounds good. That's not like cheerleader pom-pom happiness. It's more gratification, a little bit of release, but it's also, that's meaning too. I mean, Peter Ivers used to ask on New Wave Theater, what is the meaning of life? And that's part of it, I think. I mean, what makes a lot of people happy is when they find meaning in something, means something to them that's good. And something that means something to them that isn't good leads to unhappiness. Thus, the skyrocketing number of visits to psychiatrists and psychologists during Trump's reign of terror.
Very good. And you bringing up Peter Ivers was beautiful. All hail Peter. But I got the question.
Outer space is goddamn cold without you, Peter.
Hello. I got that question from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. And he sort of implies that meaning lasts and happiness doesn't necessarily last.
I mean, that's why you look for adventures and you try not to be in your COVID cave all the time, at least, especially mentally. And so I think now we're going into, okay, stimulates me. Large, good news, bad news.
So, can you hear me, Jello? The next question, that's all right. We'll deal with the freezing. It will just come in and out.
There you are.
Yeah. What's your favorite form of information? How information comes into you?
Boy, I read or things I'm told, or maybe you can't put it into words, but the sort of thing that happens when you hear good music, or for that matter, let's call it brain spin, because that's a wider umbrella term I like to use, namely, any good art. And, I have my own opinion. Okay, painting. If it's something I like, it's good. If it's something I don't care about or maybe puts me to sleep and all the critics like it, but I don't care, then I don't care. What makes my brain spin? What makes me feel all full of mental and physical energy, and suddenly these ideas start coming into my head that might not come into my head otherwise? And sometimes that can lead to especially wicked lyrics, or some licks for a new song that never would have popped in otherwise, or just something that stimulates the creative process, even if all you're doing is creating things that you may not use in your own work, but it's still, I like brain spin. An example would be when I was towards the end of working on that infamous album for Dead Kennedys called Frankenchrist. that brought us together, and Frank and Phyllis so many years ago. Well, I was pretty close to the end, and then a roommate of mine showed me a feature of the work of the paintings of H.R. Giger, which most people pronounce Geiger, but he pronounced it Giger. Anyway, and that all right off the bat, I thought this is the best paintings I have seen since Euronymous Bosch. This stuff is, oh my God, another one. Oh my God, another. And then I saw that this landscape, but Giger's title is Landscape Roman numeral 20, Where Are We Going? Which is kind of closer to how it struck me straight when I first saw it. Was, you know, all these tools in all these orifices and whatnot, violation or not. And it just like, oh my God, this is Reagan America on parade. This right there. And then it occurred to me as my brain began to spin, my God, Frankenchrist is almost a concept album about this, but not quite. And if I tweak a lyric here and there in the songs that I haven't recorded the vocals for yet, we've got ourselves a loose, semi-abstract, but definitely a concept album. And so that inspired me not only to tweak the lyrics to tie them all together better, but also that image was so strong, I thought everybody should see it. And I've long felt that, if that's something people should see, you can't expect them to go to a gallery or buy a pictorial book of Giger's work or whatever. You shove it in their face. For a while in my early punk days, I was painting all my clothes. Yeah, I'm a painter now. Cool, but I'm so cool. I don't even hang it in galleries. I force everybody to look at my so-called paintings, walking around with them on. And so the next best thing to that would be, okay, this is going to be the front cover of the album with Frankenchrist in cursive candy cane letters across the top. Then you open a gatefold, and that's that picture of the Shriner Parade, Detroit, 1976, out of Newsweek. And you open it up to that, and there's no other explanation anywhere in the album as to what this is, until maybe you pull out an insert and you get the band name, the musicians, the lyrics, and all the other good stuff. That was the original concept. And then first, the other people in the band freaked out once they realized it really was going to be the cover, after I went to all kinds of lengths, as did our alternative tentacle in Britain, to actually license the thing from Giger's agent, who was all for it, I might add, and didn't charge us a whole lot. We could actually afford it. Then they start freaking out. And the head of Rue Sports, the head of Mordam Distribution, who and other distributors, one stops, what have you, was like, you put that on the front cover, no store will stock it, period. And so then I thought, okay, well, let's do what Pink Floyd did with the Wish You Were Here album with that blue shrink wrap, or they made Roxy Music do with Country Life before they took the women off the front entirely, at least in uptight United Snakes of America, but not anywhere else. But anyway, we looked into that, and it was so damn expensive to shrink wrap it in black or some other color. We had to give up on that. And then the band was freaking out. So finally, the compromise was we used the Shriners as the cover with no explanation. And then inside, you pull out Giger's art in poster form, plus an insert with lyrics and all that other good stuff. And that was how all that happened. Of course, eventually, as you know, the DA of LA County, Jimmy Hahn, who later became a one-term mayor before people realized his sole qualification for anything. When I asked him for comment, because he was right at the beginning of a very public battle with Tipper Gore, who styled herself a liberal feminist, whose all her allies on this Parents Music Resource Organization were all deeply tied to far-right extremist fundamentalist Christians, so extreme that even Mike Pence and Amy Coney Barrett and William Barr might recoil at some of what they had in mind for the rest of us. But anyway, basically, they charged me and initially 4 other people with the distribution of harmful matter to minors. Harmful matter. That had never been defined before because that law had never been used before, and I'm not sure it ever was again after that. And I didn't even know any charges at even though the LAPD came all the way. But then my legal guy calls me, "You've been charged." And I say, "Okay, what do we do?" Just, I was assuming it was a slap on the wrist, $50 fine, whatever. He said, "No, you don't understand. CNN is calling me. CBS is calling me. The DA in LA announced this at a great big press conference." I thought, "Oh shit, I'm Tipper's pigeon. All right, lady, game on." It didn't hurt that the roommate at the time I had living at my place, Suzanne Stefanik, was an investigative journalist who later edited Macworld and stuff. And she was digging in further and further into the background and origins of the Parents Music Resource Center. And she already had figured out that every expert witness, Tipper and her main cohort, Susan Baker, who was James Baker's wife, as well as being on the board of Focus on the Family, still one of the most infamous religious right hate groups in the United States. And even the Southern Poverty Law Center calls them a hate group, if I'm not mistaken. James Dobson's people. Anyway, right there with Tipper. And she had dug up that every single other expert witness they brought before the committee chaired by her husband, Albert Gore Jr., turned out to be a right-wing crackpot preacher. And of course, as we know, no major label people showed up to counter it. And finally, Frank Zappa took it upon himself to get a nice hairdo, to put on a suit and tie, and testify against them, which emboldened, of all people, John Denver and Donny Osmond, as well as Dee Snider, to also testify against them. And the reason the major label people didn't fight him was because Al Gore was, from Tennessee, Nashville, their guy to try and get a federally imposed tax on blank cassettes going straight into the label's pockets. Kind of like all those lawsuits against single moms and stuff for file sharing that netted them bazillions, and they didn't pay the artist a dime out of that. There's a whole book about that by Steve Knopper, which is spelled Knopper.
That was a deep history, Jello. Thank you.
To the point where I forgot what the question was. If I fail to hit the nail on the head or I digress too far, you are free to make some weird noise so your face comes back on the screen and or whatever.
You're fine. This is deep history, and I appreciate it. Audre Lorde, the poet, says you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
Well, I'm not sure I have magic new tools from Uncle Jello. I apply too. I mean, you're an anarchist, right? Well, not really. I mean, I'm more of a socialist, as Tim Johann and the Maximum Rock and Roll made it clear to me, and that's what made me finally decide, yeah, I'm more of a socialist, is there has to be some kind of a government and government body and entity to take the wealth from people who have too much and get it distributed to the people who don't have enough. And if that's what socialism is, I am all in. Basically, in general terms, I would say I am all for insurrection in the streets, in the ballot box, and with our pocketbooks, where we spend our money, who you give it to, who you don't give it to, all at the same time.
Utah Phillips says anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Who's entitled to make the rules?
Fortunately, we have not to get rid of the whole concept of things like real estate and ownership and possessions. You don't see dolphins or whales or octopi or elephants putting up fences and selling real estate, let alone figuring out tools like firearms to use to make sure people don't share in what they have and stuff. So, and because there are still people in this world who commit sexual assault, and other kinds of and big time at all, there have to be laws, unfortunately. And there are people who treat other people so horribly, either in the way they commit a sexual assault or just thing. I mean, it's Buzz from the Melvins, a band I worked with on a couple albums, and his brother works in the Washington State prison system fairly high up. He said, look, as my brother says, there are people in this world who should be in prison. And unfortunately, there are. Not as many as we have there by any stretch of the imagination. You know, I not only don't believe in the death penalty, I don't think we should have life without parole either. But you see where I'm going with this, I think.
No, it was good. And the question next is, does punishment work? Just to fill it out.
Man.
Like when a criminal...
How about a few more tools here? Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I have been a long-time fan and advocate of creative crime.
Yeah.
You know, it's the last unspoiled art form left on earth. You know, you don't go to art school to learn how to commit creative acts of sabotage. Kind of serial criminal of some kind. No, everybody's starting from scratch in that regard. And there's 2 books that research publications put out called Pranks, with an exclamation mark. There goes Jerry's thumb. Are you in it or not? I can't remember.
Not in it, but the huge fan, highly influential on my whole life.
Yeah, basically that it's the same beauty as those old punk zines that V Vale also worked on, where instead of doing shop talk about scene and bands, you start poking people to get weird stories out of them about what brought them there in the first place, and whole long things on instruments of control, not just from William Burroughs, but people who had read him carefully, like Devo and Iggy and some of the others. And so you could open Search and Destroy to any page and laugh and or learn something at the same time. And the Pranks book is the same way. I mean, Timothy Leary is in there. I think it was Abby Hoffman who talked about renting a safe deposit box at some bank you want deposit box and never return. That was one. And then Paul Mavrides from Anarchy Comics, a diabolical friend of mine, talked about stumbling on a holy roller convention or a big gathering at some Holiday Inn type hotel in their big ballroom somewhere in his travels. And they got motorcycle locks and wrapped them around the doors that people went in and out of and trapped the fundamentalists in there for hours and hours and hours while they tried to find a way to get them out. I guess God didn't give them fire escapes or something. I don't know. And then they got to watch as people poured out, sweat dripping down and everything else. Oh, here's a newer one at Post Pranks book. This is really good. I'll give you 2 of the best ones I've heard about in more recent years. Number 1, another friend of mine from the music world, who grew up in the western part of Washington State. Where he grew up, there were also farms around the town, so farm kids were in the schools and stuff. One fine day, one of the farm kids brought in a stillborn calf, and then they took it down and left it in the stall of the ladies' room at McDonald's. And just hung out across the street as eventually one cop car screeched, then another one screeched, then another one screeched. But of course, the best one lately, let's give it up to all those TikTok kids who banded together one after the convincing Donald J. Trump-a-muck and his going to get 1 million people to his wannabe Nuremberg rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And there's going to be 1 million people there. We're going to have a special outdoor stage too for all the people who can't get in. He's going to talk to so many people. Everybody loves him so much. And all these fake RSVPs being sent to the Trump campaign. And Trump 2020 And then so many of them were fake that instead of a showing up perpetually empty. And then, of course, he was mostly speaking to an empty house in the big old basketball arena. And I love the picture of him after he got out of his chopper to go back into the White House. He was just looking so bedraggled and grumpy and angry and, well, defeated because, his whims weren't met that particular day. And he didn't have anybody to fire right at that moment, but he found somebody the next day. But I thought, yeah, kids, you go. You did a great patriotic thing. Just like whoever it was who recorded Mitt Romney on their cell phone from the kitchen when he was talking to that group of insiders at the restaurant or wherever in Florida and talked about the 47% of Americans are freeloaders. And this is real cool. Food! And I think that did more to tip that election back to Obama except the Occupy movement, who also played the role, basically, because that was not a pro-Obama vote like 08. That was an anti-Romney vote because he scared the shit out of people. How did he scare the shit out of people? Well, his sheer Mitt Romney-ness was exposed both through that cell phone, and people finally started digging into that company he had, Bain Capital, which was one of these vicious hedge fund type places that buys up perfectly good companies that employs thousands of people and destroys them, loots them, and sells off the remains and moves on to another host and stuff. They're like an organization of piranhas, basically. And he may be doing that again, or at least his son is. But anyway, you may recall from that election, the whole thing was so vacuous. Oh, who's for a stronger America? Who loves Israel more? Who's going to be tough on crime? The same old empty bullshit, both from Obama and from the other side. And then Occupy hits. And the thing they really didn't want to talk about, besides climate collapse, of course, was inequality. And then suddenly inequality was front and center till even my mother, who turns 92 in a couple of weeks, told me, Eric, I think those people are right with Occupy. So that's what brought people out to vote against Mitt Romney and everything he stood for. I mean, he's seen as this moderate today because he's an anti-Trump right-wing extremist. So he's still a corporate supremacist, like a lot of those people. People forget that about him and stuff. So even like that dude Joe Scarborough, the ex-Republican congressman from Florida, who now has Morning Joe, or Morning Joke, as I would call it, and from my observations, appears to be showing up drunk on the air more and more often, to the point where even the woman who I guess is still his wife, Mika Brzezinski, you see her shaking her head in the other part of the split screen. But before he was this anti-Trump desk-pounding person, he doesn't say he quit the Republican Party on Letterman, but he's still a conservative dude. The same dude who said a few years earlier that Romney picking that sadistic person who wanted to end, all safety nets, Paul Ryan, for his vice president, he said, that's the most exciting thing my party has done in years. And that right there is like, I'm never going to forget you said that, motherfucker. That is really, really, really sick. And a lot of those people are like that. I mean, the other one who's all patted on the head now, he's got a contract, taking in money from MSNBC, the nice conservative, Bill Kristol. Well, not that long ago, he was much more openly way far to the right, is credited with being the guy who got McCain to pit Sarah Palin on the ticket in 2008. Now he's pushing this guy named Evan McMullin, who's totally anti-reproductive rights, totally anti-LGBTQ and whatnot, as some kind of cool, hip dude, as what Republicans should be and stuff. And I don't buy that at all.
Jello, that was good. You're teaching me a lot, and everyone who's listening. You brought up your mom. It's Mom's Day. All the power to her. And can you conjure up, to go into your background for a sec? Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
Wow. There's a lot of them because we moved house when I was 4. Or vivid memories of the earlier house. And I could draw a map of it to this day. I remember a little cat we eventually got catching garter snakes. There was a ditch in the front yard. My parents were always afraid. And big old backyard that now has a second apartment building put in it and other things. I remember picking the little cat out of the litter because they were going to let me have a cat even at 3. So bad. So all black and white ones, like she was different. And what are you going to name her? Oh, I guess I'll name her Squonk. And her middle name was Stonewall Jackson. So that poor cat turned out a little neurotic at the end of the day, but sure did love that kitty. It lasted till I went off to school, and then she died after I left. But anyway, so there's a lot of memories like that. Even one where my mother's getting all upset because, my food came out perfectly intact when she opened up my diaper and was ashamed, afraid he was going to take me to the hospital. And maybe that memory just who the family knew was my same grade did get hospitalized over the same outbreak of horrific diarrhea in children. So I remember that. I remember the day I used the toilet for the first time because my mother was so pleased with me afterwards because I'd been stubborn and wouldn't do that as soon as they thought I should. But luckily, it was well before I started kindergarten or before we moved to the other house.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
I have them than not have them. Yeah, there's little TSD things in there, including all the hell I went through when the other former members of Dead Kennedys got really greedy and sued the living daylights out of me and seized all the rights to the catalog. And now, of course, it's controlled in America by Manifesto. Is Uncle Herb, but coming. But and the fact it just upsets me so much. However, I don't want to diminish the pain of assault victims or people who were in combat or something like that by really flaunting the same term. That's not what I'm trying to do. But I would rather remember things than not remember things. Even hating bullies in kindergarten on up helped make me angry at bullies. And of course, there's all kinds of bullies. And my feeling, they're trying to end bullying in the school system now. Well, okay, that's all well and good, but we're conditioned. They teach people to be bullies in school because that's what business wants. We want the mean ones with brains and skill to float to the top because we need them to continue our rule over everyone else. Nobody gets to be a zillionaire by being a nice person, right?
Yep.
I mean, we can all say, oh, wow, Steve Jobs, what great devices. What a cool dude. Oh, Elon Musk, the new Thomas Edison, whatever. That's starting to just become obvious that Mr. Musk is not that different from Larry Ellison or Bill Gates or Peter Thiel. And now it's obvious that Mr. Zuckerberg is coming out, as you peel the onion, more and more that he is honest to God far right. It's kind of like with people like that, you might have less greed and less bullying if we realize that extreme wealth is its own form of addiction. There are crack addicts and there are wealth addicts. And people, you make your first million. Oh, wow, I made my first. God, I win. But now what do? I want to win some more. I must win. I must win. I must keep winning and keep winning and keep winning and keep winning. Therefore, somebody always has to lose. And that's like crack addiction or something. What's wrong with your first million? We talk about tax reform. Well, I want to go one step further, like what the California Green Party proposed so long ago when I joined. And that is, have a minimum wage. Why not a maximum wage? That's not going to make us all grim and so. Okay, people are freaking out. Bill Maher really did when he discussed that on Politically Incorrect. How dare you? But I thought, okay, I'll raise it for you. 1 million a year, and everything else goes back to the public good. And what do you get from all that going back to the public good? You get good. You get free health care for everybody. You get free education for everybody. You get free transportation for everybody, including the long overdue construction of high-speed rail all over this country. Not just because it's more ecological, but because I'm so damn old. I'm 62 now. I remember, you want to talk about early memories? I remember traveling by passenger train and things, going from Denver to Chicago to go to Grandma and Grandpa's place in South Haven, Michigan, outside of there. I loved those trains, especially the later ones. I took when my dad and I went to Alaska. We took a train from Anchorage and then stopped off at Denali National Park, which is still called McKinley then, got off in Fairbanks. Eventually caught another train after driving and taking the Inland Passage boat to Prince Rupert, British Columbia, right in the northern part, right below the Alaska Panhandle. Incredible train ride through the Canadian Rockies. And then you take another train, you change at Jasper, you know, one of those incredible national parks, that and Banff and the other two that are all clustered together. Yellowstone, Yosemite, that one. You know, you gotta go there. And anyway, and La Glaciera de Perito Moreno in Argentina was awfully amazing too. But anyway, then you catch another train, which would get you through Banff on the way back and all the way down to Vancouver. Trains are cool. They're romantic. They're relaxing. Between cities, there's no traffic jams, there's no metal detectors, nothing. You can even get drunk on the train, which I experienced once on my fear and loathing hippie backpack trip to Europe in '77, where I shared in a train car with drunk British soldiers. And I don't know what they were going to do to me when they realized I was American. But as soon as they found out I liked the Sex Pistols, suddenly they were my friends. And, you know, and being so into that and everything, I even knew who the Cortinas were, and the now lesser known bands were also putting out their debut singles and, you know, slowly but surely blowing up the boredom of 70s major label entertainment industry pop culture. Suddenly, people my age no longer were just being fed, oh, adult rock, soft rock, disco. And for you people who want something a little more rock and roll, well, you can go see some great big arena show with, I don't know. That was all I could go to when I was a kid. So, you know, and some of them I have fond memories of. Alice Cooper was the first one. And then, who did I see? Foghat, who was, and Rory Gallagher opened, which in retrospect was one of the best live bands I ever saw in my life. You like Chuck Dukowski from Black Flag? Well, Rory's bass player, Jerry McAvoy, was that physical, and he never missed a note. And wow. Black Sabbath on Halloween, that was real good. I got on stage during the costume contest with something just thrown together with a leopard bathrobe and an Andean tribal hat and stuff. And they let me on, so I bowed down and kissed Congresswoman Pat Schroeder's feet before they led me from the stage. And years later, people say, oh, yeah, I was at that stage. Some weird dude went and kissed Schroeder's feet in the middle of it. I mean, that was me. Although the other two great memories of that show were the downside was, well, first Boston opened. That album with More Than a Feeling and everything had just come out. So they basically were fourth on the bill and just kind of a bar band in the way they their presence, and then I'm watching Jerry yawn on the screen there, and then
No, I'm here.
and then imagine how upset we became, me and my friend Sam, who I still know. The lights go dark. Ladies and gentlemen, the future of rock and roll. Heart. And we're going, no, there's got to be better than this. Where's the Stooges? Where's the Pink Fairies? Where's this? They're not there anymore. We don't want this. This isn't the future. Luckily, Black Sabbath salvaged the show after Heart because they were so good. And I was completely unprepared because they weren't good on Don Kirshner's rock concert, but they sure were that night. Oh, yeah.
No, Jello, this is all good. Thank you. You're very articulate. You're a spokesperson for me and many people, and you're dang articulate, and we appreciate it. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Well, by saying evil uses people, you're implying that it's some kind of polter. You don't have to be afraid of Satanists if you don't believe in God. You don't have to believe any of it and stuff. So evil is that kind of thing that creeps in and out. No, and I do think there are people who, through upbringing or whatever, the psychopaths, the sociopaths, and whatever, are just plain bad people. And unfortunately, they are getting more and more successful at rising to the top of the toilet bowl and then trying to force us to submit to their and stuff. It's at Trumpsies, Trumpzis. It's not even like the Bush-Cheney regime, where people forget just how horrible those people were. Or that Reagan or the first Bush and whatnot, who my father thought was a history buff, was the worst president in history up to that point. Worse than Harding, worse than Buchanan, worse than Reagan, or even Nixon. But let's not forget Nixon, too. I mean, even when he was running for a House seat in the 40s, he smeared people as communists for no good reason to try and get himself ahead. I mean, an uncle of mine, I think aunt and uncle, I think it was the uncle, knew somebody when they lived in Palo Alto who went to high school with Dick Nixon, and said even then he cheated during high school debates, ran for every office he could, and lost every single time because people couldn't stand him, which has to have partly fueled how vengeful that guy was. Like Trumpsy and some of the others, he never forgot a slight. The same like when Adolf Hitler seized Austria during the Anschluss, one of the first people supposedly that he had hunted down and killed was whoever caused the accident when they were playing together as children that cost Adolf one of his testicles.
Okay, that was super. Listen, this question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? Now, let me fill it out with a few modern thinkers' thoughts. And you've talked about some of these tools very effectively. But Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but
He
don't
went
forget
silent
their name.
after if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. And
Okay,
I disagree with that. I think you have to, and you have to know who they are and what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
Individually or to the planet collectively, which is again going to affect you individually at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's basically this. That's what I'm after. Just your strategies on how to deal with an enemy, because like JFK says, if forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Walt Whitman said, I no doubt deserve my enemies. How do you process those other ideas on enemy?
Well, I mean, not everybody likes me. And I just have to accept that. Some just because of personality or because I'm a stress case when I shouldn't be, or many others because they just don't dig the points of view that are coming out of my mouth and want to kill or intimidate the messenger. A lot of violence when we came out with the song Nazi Punks Fuck Off in 1981 with Dead Kennedys, and that was not against Nazi party people in particular, because there wasn't that much of that, but there were people who had come into the scene, and some of them were straight out of, skating and surfing scenes, who were very athletic, very strong, and loved to beat people up. That doesn't mean all surfers or skaters were like that at all. Many of them didn't, and really didn't want those people they hated encountering in other parts of their lives, have suddenly decided they like the same music they do, and there they are. But the point being that, that song comes out, and then genuine racist, white supremacists, and people who thought Hitler was really cool started coming out of the woodwork, and violent threats or actual violence on me and other band members, and then other people in other towns who were known anti-fascists or Dead Kennedy or MDC fans or whatever, and suddenly, for that and other reasons, after all these years, little pockets of the scene by 1985 and the gigging circuit had skinhead problems. And they were not, for the most part, the sharp skins, the anti-racist ones. That was formed later to counter them, but they were, they were kind of wannabe armchair fascists and stuff.
Good.
Not skilled enough or added enough of them to go after stronger or even better armed targets. The punks just want to have fun. Let's just beat them up instead. So it got ugly from time to time. But, even when the people were getting, originally it was just people who'd get up on stage and then stage dive off, fists first, and punch somebody in the back of the head and run. And I thought, this is not just chicken shit. These are a bunch of fucking jocks, only they're not even jocks. You can't coach these people. They're just bullies. They're just assholes. They're acting like a bunch of Nazis. Nazi punks, fuck off. And part of the reason for that was somebody else, I think it was somebody in Social Unrest, that band came up to me, when after a really bad fight at one of the shows at 10th Street Hall, said, isn't anybody going to say anything about this? And I thought, yeah, I've been thinking about it. Maybe I just should. And that was the quickest song I ever wrote. Words, music, lyrics done in, I think, about 30 minutes or less. Maybe
Jello.
way less, because I dictated it into my handy recording Walkman and sang it while I was driving, and then it was done.
Wow. Jello, can you talk about your lyric writing process? I appreciate what you do in your lyrics and how you present them, but I know your dad was a poet. Can you talk about poetry first in your life? What is the function of poetry? Did early poets have an influence on you? And then what led you to the process of writing lyrics?
More other people's lyrics than poets, actually. Yes, my father was a poet and whatnot, also a psychiatric social worker, pioneer, mental health movement guy, rock climbing pioneer, all of which I've kind of failed at and disgraced his memory, perhaps not. But he was always bummed I didn't read Shakespeare and stuff. I'm not super well read. Maybe I'm good at making myself look that way, but that's about as far as that skill goes. So sometimes key facts come out in book reviews and I just use them and stuff, but and then there's a source you can quote. But overall, the lyrics, it mainly came from other music lyrics, because I was so into music ever since my parents blundered into a rock station in 1965 when I was 7 years old, because they couldn't get me to go to sleep, and they were classical music people and very highbrow literature people and stuff. And but as soon as I heard that, I want this, and I quickly gravitated towards the hard stuff. Okay, the Beatles, cool, because other people know who they are, but the early Stones, Paul Revere and the Raiders, who are greatly underappreciated now for how influential they were on so many other garage rock bands. That term wasn't there then, by the way, but people are now called garage rock. Local bands got played on commercial AM radio stations at that time. So growing up in Boulder outside of Denver, here's Denver's own Moonrakers. And here's Colorado's own from Boulder, the Astronauts and stuff. And the Monocles and another band called the Soul Survivors, not Expressway to Your Heart, Soul Survivors, different one. And later on, Sugarloaf and blah de blah. But and then came the cocaine cowboy era, when it was one of the ground zero testing grounds for who's going to be the next Eagles, the next Firefall, who were called a Boulder band, even though they were guys who came out from LA. And Dan Fogelberg, who came out and suddenly he was Colorado. John Denver comes out from Texas. Suddenly he's Colorado. And I'm like, this isn't Colorado to me. At least I'm pulling 13th floor elevators and NAS out of the free box at Trade-A-Tape and getting to experience that. Again, I mean, the stuff I liked, they couldn't resell. So I got all the Doors albums in 6 weeks for free. But Funhouse, Stooges, best album ever made. I got it sealed for a dime when I was a sophomore in high school. I had already discovered the MC5 simply because this super squarehead music critic from the Denver Post devoted his whole capsule review column to how much he hated Alice Cooper. Right when I had first gotten into Alice Cooper in 8th grade, kind of bought on record. My sister was still young enough, she needed one, but he and I were really good friends. Michael Gomez, older brother I never had. He was a huge Zappa and Beefheart guy too, which I didn't quite get that for another year. But Alice Cooper, I immediately, wow, finally rock and roll lyrics that mean something. I mean, there's these great topical Pete Seeger songs. My parents had his records and some Joan Baez, and then there was the Dylan stuff people looked up to later and all. It was like, and I didn't know who Phil Oakes was yet, but I really dug some of his sense of humor and sarcasm that. But basically, it was like, but why can't rock and roll lyrics be about something other than shooby dooby wah wah wah, I love you, or oh, she done me wrong? And then later comes sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and it's all corny. And it was even more corny when I got older and got interested in girls and realized that all these teen love songs were just complete bullshit. And this is all meant to sell you perfume, sell you clothes, sell you hairspray and everything else. Thank you, Frank Zappa, for pointing some of these things out in a way that we could all laugh at those people as we came of age and not be too upset we aren't one of them. And really good thing he did for so many people. And people thanked me for doing that for them too. But anyway, where was I getting? Well, yes, lyrics. So that was my first thought, okay, you can have good stuff with this. Dead babies and all these under my wheels. This means something to me. And I read Dead Babies in the 8th grade speech class, and the teacher liked it too. He was a Southern Baptist from Oxford, Mississippi, but luckily he was also my director for the plays and stuff and was very demanding of the cast, and it was method director and all that good stuff. So a lot of that went into things later too. But so then later lyrics I really liked. I mean, I liked the Primal Scream stuff as how Iggy Pop expressed himself. And then when I finally stopped laughing and started taking, much more seriously Hank Williams and realized what a special thing he was going to be to me from then on. You can say a lot in a few words. Can't do it. I mean, if I could cut my 4-hour spoken word shows down to 45 minutes and make it all work, I would. But I have some talents, but not others. So, the wordiness and the cruel sarcasm and fine detail from both Frank and even maybe more directly on my own writing style was the males, Ron and Russell Mael and Sparks. Especially the Indiscreet album and the 2 before that and everything. That's a little closer to my own style. And then another band that was very influential in the lyric department, and they were really good heavy rock too. And I'm amazed that none of the British punk pioneers acknowledged that, have maybe even ever heard them, was a band called Third World War. And they were definitely not coming from the same place that somebody like, say, Crass, or even the Sex Pistols were, or the Clash later. They were more along the lines of Marxists or even communists, and they had no problem with armed revolt. Thus the name and some of the songs. You know, I've got just the thing for you, a real cop beater, a sawed-off 12-gauge 5-shot repeater. Get your ass along down to Hammersmith Town. Join the urban you know, and they got away with it. And so that was one too. And then by the time I was trying to figure out who I was, what I do, I didn't like have notebooks full of poetry. I just trying to go, and he was the better lyricist at that point. So I just thought, yeah, I'll come up with the music. He'll come up with that. But then he didn't come for another 2 years or so, maybe 3. So I got to do myself. I got to do the lyrics too. Search and Destroy zine was good for this because they were from some of these bands who'd never had a recording released or what. Yeah, give me a lyric or two, or tell us what's in your record collection. You got to find out what was in the Screamers record collection. And fascinating stuff. They like to go through people's closets too. And so I was trying to, if I'm going to do lyrics, I better make them good. And also early on, one of the early songs I was trying to write about this weird guy, speaking of pranks, back in Boulder, this hippie dude with these wild stoned eyes and these 2 dogs who would just fixate on somebody with this weird grin. And they would follow you. He'd follow people and stuff. And I even ran into him in a Kresge store or something in what was then called a shopping center. There he was. What has he got on me? Why is he doing this? And then I realized that, oh my God, I know why he's doing this. I'm going to man with the dogs this person, you know, or in a grocery store, get some Charmin toilet paper and go start squeezing it and follow people around. And then I realized it was a great pranking tool. At least as good as when the 2 BART trains pull up at a station and the windows are next to each other and you point in somebody in the other train and start laughing at them. I see people pounding on the glass and flicking me off and wanting to get off the train and fight them and all that. So, but for the Man with the Dog song, nothing was working. And I'm not really well versed in William Burroughs' actual literature, although I knew him a little bit later on. But my roommate at the time, Mike Ellis, was really, really into William Burroughs and kept trying to get me to read Naked Lunch. Have you started yet? And also laid out the cut-up technique. We'd done that earlier, actually, because we'd met as these 2 misfit punks during my 1 quarter of college at UC Santa Cruz. And we did acid and then room and cut up a bunch one and read them into a tape recorder. And very quickly, I could not distinguish between the news text and the advertising text. And that was a great lesson to me about how, you know, this corporate McNews really works. And, you know, you got to be very careful, even with those, you know, all and whatnot, or may leave out important parts of the story, which is one of the ways I define censorship. And that's the worst kind of censorship going on now, even worse than shutting down so hitting important parts of news stories that might do things like tip an election and things, and prove that if you really want to investigate vote fraud, you need to first look into 2001, 2004, and 2016, and notice that the people who are whining about vote fraud now were the ones who were monkeying with the electronic votes and all kinds of other things, as detailed by Greg Palast in that Best Democracy Money Can Buy book, and the documentary made of the same title in 2016 about the Interstate Crosscheck Program, which Kobach, that new Kansas, although I think he's Harvard, maybe Oxford, and he's still pretty young. Anyway, he wrote the Show Me Your Papers law for Arizona too. But anyway, he's got 29 states worth of voters, combine them all together, look for people who vote twice. This horrible vote fraud. And it must be people named Washington. Look for all the Washingtons, because 75% of people named Washington are African American. Boom, out you go. Jose Gonzalez will get all 500 of you out of all these voter rolls. You didn't vote either. And since you probably voted absentee, you don't even know you didn't vote. And suddenly Donald Trump is president. And suddenly known crackpots expected to lose in 2016, like Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin, Toomey in Pennsylvania, Burr in North Carolina, and some of the others, they get back in just in time to put Gorsuch and Kavanaugh the rapist and Amy I Can't Bear It all on the Supreme Court when they shouldn't be there, which now means there's a 5-4 majority of Supreme Court so-called justices who were appointed by presidents who stole elections. They shouldn't be there at all, and they know it. They all know it.
Yeah. Jello.
And again, I forgot the original question.
No, you covered it really well. You covered lyric, and this is, I'm going to combine two questions, and then you can go. Because
okay, to finish on lyrics, I cut up the lyrics to The Man with the Dogs and played with them. And after an hour or two of that, suddenly I had a song.
Yeah.
So I have used that ever since, especially in the large recordings I do with Al Jorgensen and the Ministry people. Is since the first one, he had Power of Lard, it was on the spur of the moment in Chicago. I didn't have any lyrics with me. So I had to write down one-liners, cut stuff out of the Tribune, add slogans, headlines, put them all together, and that became the Power of Lard, which I then realized after, my God, there is a thread to this after all. The Power of Lard, in another way, is shaming so many people about their looks and their bodies, especially, but not entirely women. It makes them that much easier to control and neutralize any questioning and rebellious tendencies. Is through the power of lard. Yeah. So sometimes the meaning will come later.
Exactly. So let me just string a couple questions together, and then you can go for it. This is working really well. The first, I'm going to give about 3 questions, and then you go for it. And it's back to this lyric writing. And the first part is, a screenwriting teacher told me that great film or great art or great music is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick says the opposite. Great film or great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. So then Godard told Michael Moore when he premiered Fahrenheit 9/11 that his film was going to help Bush get elected. Now, it didn't get Bush elected per se, but it galvanized pro-Bush.
Well, no, he stole that election. He stole both of his.
He stole it. But I'm just saying, I'm talking about the intention of your lyrics, because they're powerful. You're saying you grew up hearing these other kind of shooby-dooby lyrics in love making, and you said, no, I can say more with my lyrics. And then it's the user is the content. How can once the artist creates their art, it's no longer theirs. How much does intention play in your lyric writing? What's the role of intention in your creative process?
Well, number one, that same song, The Man with the Dogs, was still abstract enough that anybody who was curious about it, either people who would talk to me or in interviews, none of them had the faintest idea what it was about. And I thought, okay, I don't want to be, and no offense to Tom Verlaine from television, who's very poetic and very abstract at times, that's not where I want to go. I want to whack people over the head. Not necessarily tell them what to do, although be so blunt and explicit, they kind of might be inspired to do some things that I think are important, or at least question things I think are important. Even the more Zappa-ish social satire songs like Terminal Preppy, Winnebago Warriors, Strength Through Shopping, or some of those, there is a message there this could be you. Is it you? It's kind of me at times, even though I'm writing this, but it doesn't have to be. If you recognize that ahead of time, you don't have to be one of what Frank called plastic people and stuff. So I like being blunt, and I like being visual, and I like painting pictures like you are there and you feel it and it surrounds you. And it took me years to realize, even after my longtime recording engineer, Matt Kelly, told a recording studio magazine that trying to deal with me as an artist and especially as a producer when we're mixing or whatever is more like dealing with a film director than a musician, because I'm all about mood and vibe and not about getting every single cymbal tingle to sound and have to occupy the same space everywhere by committee or whatever. I'm after impact, and I know what kind of impact I want, both musically, because I take a lot of pride in the music being good too. It's not just good lyrics and lame music. It's supposed to be good lyrics and maybe even better music that happens to have good lyrics instead of stupid ones and stuff, and still rocks when, yeah, and most of the stuff I do want it to rock. The punk energy is still the wellspring, even when I'm mixing in exotica or movie music at the same time. So there's that. But then only years later, I realized, hey, wait a minute. It's not just the director thing. It's also all that training and method acting stuff. I mean, I had the Boris Karloff role in Arsenic and Lace. I played Scrooge one year in high school, and I'd love to do that one again someday. And some other ones that were deeper and almost more spiritual, like the one conscientious person at the trial in the Inquisition of Joan of Arc, not in St. Joan, but the other play like that called The Lark. And there was a really good actress named Jane Shepard, who's also made and directed films and things, and to this day, who was Joan. And so I was the one trying to get through to her that there was a way to save her life, and I knew it was a kangaroo court, and none of the others did. And ironically, Boris Karloff was the original guy who played that on Broadway, but it was a heavy-duty dramatic role for old Boris and stuff. And I'm sure he did it great. I would love to have seen that. But anyway, but it was that level. And I occasionally, once in a while, get that on stage with Dead Kennedys, where I could actually start seeing things in my mind eye that were part of the song. Very rarely, because I have to switch characters from time to time and still be Jello Biafra, the performer, always being nervous I'm not doing a good enough job or whatever, wanting everybody in the palm of my pincers and stuff. So that's all there. But what I also realized was, hey, wait a minute. The method acting stuff had a huge influence on the lyrics as well. Why did I want to paint pictures with the points I'm trying to make? Why did I want to put in so many things? But, I've done that too. I've seen that. Oh my God, I don't ever want to be in that position, whatever. And not just, not just say, ooh, this is bad or whatever. And the one album of mine after we met that Frank Zappa ever took a look or a listen to, or maybe just looked at the words, I don't know, was the last Dead Kennedys album, Bedtime for Democracy. And his only comment was, I think that you could actually use some more humor here. And I didn't quite say this to him. I can't remember what I just was like, but Frank, I'm not quite going for the same thing with all these songs. And like another one you haven't heard off of Plastic Surgery Disaster is called Bleed for Me, is about the dirty war in Latin America, including pretty graphic descriptions of the tortures and stuff. I don't know how to use Zappa humor with that kind of torture at the courtesy of the Videla dictatorship in Argentina, or Geisel in Brazil, or El Salvador, Guatemala, and of course, more recently, the United States. And I can't always go for that approach, although I do like being a wise ass, and I'm very proud if I can get at least as big a belly laugh out of a one-liner as people like Sparks or Frank or some of the others, or Phil Oakes with Love Me, I'm a Liberal, which I covered later and barely had to rewrite the words at all for Clinton followers and stuff. You know, I like having all kinds. I've got Third World War at my disposal. I've got Alice Cooper at my disposal. You know, imagine if you, instead of writing about monsters and fictitious murderers and stuff, writing about the police instead. And then there's this thing that comes out in the paper about a group of rogue cops in Oakland who are pulling women in the back of a truck and raping them and stuff. And thus the police truck song. That was a real thing that I detailed in that song. And I was talking about somebody else last night about James Angleton, that old super spook and stuff from the CIA, and put out, you know, he's in the corner of the collage for the song I Am the Owl. Guess who the owl is? You know, it's part Angleton and part a few other people. And
Okay,
stuff.
Jello,
So,
that was well done, really well. And you are the spokesman for so many of us, and I'm grateful that you stayed true to yourself. Duchamp said that there is no art without an audience. So this question is again compact with another one. How much do you think of your audience when you're writing the song? Like Cindy Sheehan said, we're just speaking to the choir, and there isn't even a choir. So do you find your intention is more activating or pacifying people? We want to believe that art works, you know, and it activates people. But to deal with that sort of conundrum of how much you want to do something with your lyrics, and then what does it do?
well, I mean, you know, some people have told me, you know, that the fact that they still like the newer music I do, and not just the so-called classics from early on in Dead Kennedys and everything, you know, which should come, and part of that comes from not only really pushing yourself to be as good as you possibly can, but having an audience that's into you that much, you damn well better be good and not start, you know, just punching a clock and cranking out empty, hollow shells and formulas. Why don't you make another album like Fresh Fruit? Because it would just turn out to be a bad fresh fruit for rotting vegetables. And it's not even my favorite Dead Kennedys album. I mean, I'm really proud that no two music albums I've ever had my name on sound alike. Not even the Lard albums I did with the Ministry guys sound alike. And now there's 3 Jello, Biafra, and the Guantanamo School of Medicine albums, including this new one called Tea Party Revenge Porn. Sorry for the shrink wrap. I had to keep it on there. But, you know, silver cover that says, look here, this is your brain on Trump. And that's a brain inside the, you know, a rattler or a cottonmouth's mouth. And there you see your head inside the brain getting poisoned. That was the idea with that. I'm really, really into good packaging too, in case you haven't noticed. You know, I've been the art director on every single album and 7-inch I've ever put out. It's been executed by others with the other part of the skills and stuff, sometimes even choosing one of their own pieces of art, and then they go to town with them there, like Shepard Fairey and stuff, and John Yates. But anyway, I'm getting distracted again.
No, that's all right. Jello, I interviewed Winston Smith with all these same questions, and you're doing great. The next question.
I know about hitting on the nail on the head as far as the original question with Cindy Sheehan and everything goes.
Yeah,
is
go ahead.
Basically what has sustained me and sustained my interest is not only that people actually are still interested in what I do, and boy, am I grateful to everybody for that somebody would even care at this point. I mean, thank you so much. I try to do the best I can to measure up to whatever it is that got you into my thing in the first place. But that also means that part of the reason to sustain me, I'm still that same kid who got that into rock and roll at age 7 that I was jumping up and down on the bed pretending I was Eric Burden or Mitch Ryder when I was supposed to be going to sleep. And then seeing Alice Cooper on the initial the pilot thing of that show called In Concert that they show late at night. Then came Midnight Special. Then came Don Kirsh's rock concert. You could watch all 3. But In Concert was the best because it was shot in the raw in front of a live audience. And the first one they did was Alice Cooper. And all the Walter Mitty stuff from watching the Rolling Stones and the Raiders and the Animals on Hullabaloo at the Agogo at the end of Hullabaloo, where they had the really wild go-go dancer in the cage with hair practically down to her ass, Leda Edmund Jr., my first crush. She's still a trainer to this day and was one of the most important stunt women in the history of Hollywood later. Made some good records too. But anyway, that Walter Mitty thing came back with a vengeance when I started seeing the in-concert things. Not just Alice Cooper, but all the other things you could do and stuff. Again, Sparks, Black Oak, Arkansas was really good, and the one that was in the Raw, and everything else. And that belt buckle of his made me pick a star buckle off the wall on my 15th birthday, and I still have it. It's not on now because we're on Zoom and I've got sweatpants on, but and it's hiding under some blob I got to get rid of. But anyway, my point being that the Walter Mitty thing, the fan thing, and then when I saw the Ramones in Denver opening for an FM radio rock band, they blew off the stage and scared the living daylights out of all the music executives and whatnot who were part of the cocaine cowboy scene who were there to see the headliner. And all these people, not just me, were thinking, my God, this is so good. It's so much better than we ever thought it would be. And we were laughing at the Ramones till now. Those short songs, Beat on the Brat with a baseball bat. Now I want to sniff some glue. Ah, ha, ha. Let's laugh at this and let's listen to another space rock or prog rock album and smoke some more weed. But after seeing them live, a lot of people, and they knew this was going on all over the country, that they were the great seed planters, the great Johnny Appleseed of the best germ of the, musical germ until hip hop came along, at least that influential. And it's so awesome. It's so simple. Anybody could do this. Joey just kind of has that one move on stage. I could do more than that. I'm weird anyway, and I talk with my hands, blah, blah. Oh, wait a minute. I could do this. Maybe I will. And, all kinds of bands came out of that one Ramones show. Dead Kennedys, Angst, who made 4 albums on SST, the Wax Trax label, and that was originally a Denver store before Jim Nash and Danny Flesher moved it to Chicago and then later started their label. And even their flagship guy, Al Jorgensen Ministry, insists he was at that show too, because he was going to school in Colorado at the time. And Don Fleming, who did Velvet Monkeys and Gumball, as well as the Stroke Band earlier and some others. And last I crossed paths with him, he was working at the Lomax archives in New York, and I got to see all that stuff. Oh, what that would take a whole other Gerry Fialka show to talk about that one. Maybe you should interview him or one of the other Lomax people. Anyway, so all kinds of things grew out of that show. And the Ramones were doing that all over the country. And then Joseph Pope, my friend who later started Angst with his brother, John, he came like, I was just talking to the Ramones. And Joe was a very aggressive guy anyway, compared to the rest of us. But then I was like, you can talk to a rock star? All I'd ever been to was arena rock shows, except one other show for Commander Cody at this record company showcase club called Ebbets Field, where the Ramones played. And so we went back and we hung out with the Ramones. They're kind of glad to see us too, because we understood what they were doing and we liked it and everything. And I even had them sign my albums. I'd never had them because Leave Home had come out that week. So I'd never done that before. And that was a lesson to me later, is even if it's like at an irritating time, try to make sure you sign people's stuff. Because just remember what the Ramones even saying boo to you meant to you at the time, and things like that. So ironically, when Frank Zappa handed me an album, it never even occurred to me to get him to sign it. We just kind of knew each other a little bit, and that was that. But anyway, so
that was good. Jello, that was good. Let's stay on music for a second. I'll combine two. What is the function of music, and discuss it in these realms? My friend says there's 3 T's to music: taste, which is heart; technique, which is hand; and theory, which is head. So you can learn technique, you can learn theory. How do you acquire taste in music, or the heart of music, and what is the function of music?
That is so academic. It's a great way to interfere with anybody's creative process if they want to create or even listen to music. it's just like what I said about paintings, and back to being a fan once again, who still is a voracious collector of weird ass vinyl and gets influences from all over the map so my stuff doesn't get stale. It's not because I plan that so my stuff won't get stale. It just happens naturally because I enjoy the whole thing. And every piece of music I hear doesn't have to inspire me with brain spin or whatever, but every once in a while it does. And I love like magic accidents. Just get something on a hunch, like it has death in the title and it's a 45 in a thrift store. You know, anything with a word like death or voodoo or whatever might be a good 45. I started trying to get all the 60s garage 45s and blundered into instrumentals and loved those. Looked for more instrumentals and suddenly I'm hearing all this great rockabilly stuff. And then I start getting into rhythm and blues and country and the instrumentals start spreading, plus my appreciation, whether I thought I had it or not, for classical music from my family. We always agreed on Karl Orff, but not necessarily on Mozart or whatever. But my point being, Tomato from the Screamers was right. Yo, Jello, you got to get into John Barry. You got to get into Ennio Morricone. And I didn't know who either of them were, but I quickly realized, oh, I know this music already. This is really cool. And stuff like that. It's just all, so basically, when I'm creating this stuff, trying to get songs done, the most important person to like it is me.
Yeah.
I'm making it for me. Thank you very much. I want these albums remixed till they sound as good as they can possibly be for me. I want them to be good enough. I want to get out and work out on them or something, you know? I don't want old man punk by numbers. I want something that tears people's heads off on stage or in the studio, because that's where a lot of my songwriting is at, because that's some of my favorite stuff from other people. I mean, I told my girlfriend the other day, Anne Marie, that when I was playing her some of the old mixtapes I used to make, in variety of genres and stuff, and telling her, what I try for with my albums is something as good as those mixtapes. Maybe someday I'll even succeed. So basically I make it because I like to make stuff. I mean, I could never make anything again and just play old songs like the other ex-members of Dead Kennedys do. But I like new stuff. That was the agreement when we started Guantanamo School of Medicine. It's for new music. It's not supposed to be Jello Biafra's name at the top and play old songs. And initially, when I was playing live again with the Melvins, I didn't want to play any. We had a lot of back and forth. They're saying, no, we want to play these songs. We want to play them because for us, too, and how much that show you did in '83 with 10-Minute Warning in Seattle meant to us as these kids from out in another part of the state and stuff, out in the Aberdeen area. This made us want to make music, and look where they are now. So glad to help be a gateway drug there, my friends. But it was also, okay, we'll play some of those songs, but it's got to be mainly our stuff. And that's kind of the rule now. I think we've ever played more than 5 Dead Kennedy songs in the Guantanamo School of Medicine set. When the audience hears the other songs, instead of yelling for Too Drunk to Fuck over and over again, suddenly they realize, hey, wait a minute, this is good. This is the family recipe, only it's also this, and it's also that. I like to widen the base of the pyramid. I don't like to do things like, oh, I have matured as an artist now. Every time somebody says they've matured, I realize that's a clue, even if it's a critic or a journalist who says it, this is when they start to suck.
Yeah.
It's just like a politician calling themselves a centrist. Never trust a centrist. Richard Nixon saw himself as a centrist, for crying out loud. You look at the actual policies of a Bill Clinton or even an Obama or a Biden, he was. They all are. I mean, mainly the really bad stuff that's happening to us now is, instead of Watergate running Nixon out of town and people thinking, oh, Vietnam's over, we ran this guy out, now we can relax, and then you got soft rock and stupid stuff and people not agitating anymore, politically. Thus, the early punks before Reagan were already fully formed. Sorry, Reagan didn't make punk better. Everybody from Crass to Black Flag to the Bad Brains, everybody were already fully formed. And what we were after was corporate rule and the robotic society, the new conformity, the new establishment, including a lot of Summer of Love icons and people below them who were hostile as hell to punks in this town. In sharp contrast to Vancouver, where the managers of DOA and the Canadian Subhumans were both ex-yippies and saw punk as a continuation of that part of agitation. And I hate to use the word revolution because I think it's kind of, I think we can more realistically expect evolution, and that's what we should work for and stuff. But
yeah, that's we call that re-evolution. But Moshe
instead, I agree with Jerry Casale from Devo when he said the very fact that Trump even got anybody to vote for him is solid proof that de-evolution is real.
Yes. Very good. In Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're usually taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you've incorporated to become a strength.
I would say I'm more outgoing than I was growing up. A combination of shyness and social awkwardness and not liking very many people. The people I did like, I still like, and we still know each other. But that doesn't mean there's any point in going to high school reunions. But I don't want to be surrounded by Fleetwood Mac and Elton John fans and, you know, Leonard Skinner is their idea of fierce, savage rock music and whatnot. No, but you know, at least I grew up around a lot of mutants because Boulder had the University of Colorado and the weird professors' kids and a lot of science institutes and stuff. So there's scientist kids too. And that was when the term freak became a term of endearment. If you're one of those degenerates with long hair, and there were so many freaks at Boulder High, we didn't even all know each other. And I didn't realize how lucky that was to be in that situation. So I got Dear Abby letters to Jello in the P.O. box. I'm the only weird person in my little town. Everybody else, they're bullies. Some of them are really right-wing Christians who want to beat me up because I don't like Reagan and stuff like that. And all I can say to them is, oh my God, I'm so glad I didn't grow up like that, especially with parents who tried to make me into that too. Which, yeah, I rebelled against my parents a lot. But in retrospect, compared to most parents, they were borderline radical in a lot of ways. And they never concealed the news from the kids. And that proved to be very, very important. You know, I'd watch a couple cartoons eventually. I didn't watch them all afternoon, just a couple. Then the local news would come on, and then NBC News, and I would watch all of them with equal fascination. Told at the time my favorite cartoon characters seemed to be Bullwinkle and Senator Everett Dirksen. But and you saw the Berlin Wall go up, Oswald gets shot live on television. And of course, those networks were independently owned, trying to outscoop each other with kick-ass, muckraking journalism instead of just please the advertisers and the General Electric executives after they swallowed NBC or Disney at ABC, and Fox didn't even exist yet. But anyway, it meant that the news was much more unfiltered, much more uncensored, where you actually saw really bloody wounded soldiers from Vietnam right up close. You didn't have to worry about embedding. They were right there. You saw the starving children in the Republic of Biafra, which tried to break away from Nigeria, and the Nigerian army, with help from us and especially the British, starved them out, basically. And the bloated bellies and the big eyes and and everything, people lying over the ground like that, mostly children. I'll never forget that. And that was seared into everybody's mind before it disappeared out of the news in later famines. Thus, Jello Biafra seemed a good way to have two images collide in the mind later on. The news was uncensored, and instead of changing the channel so as not to upset the kids, I saw the marchers getting hosed and having dogs sicked on them. And then my mother saying, I just don't understand why anybody would hurt anybody else because of the color of their skin. And that had a pretty deep impression. And then, following Chicago 68, the trial afterwards, and everything else, I was a really serious news hound and stuff. And because my parents didn't hide reality from the kids. But then later, even people I grew up with who saw this stuff too, and even in 4th grade, everybody knew who was for and against the Vietnam War and stuff. And then the next year, it's the vote between Nixon and Humphrey. And I realized pretty fast, because it was so close, that, hey, not everybody here agrees with me at all, do they? Oh, well, that's what the real world is. There was a real witch hunt over who cast the one vote for George Wallace, but crime never solved. But anyway, but then later they would come to me and say, I don't remember any of this stuff. And I'm like, hey, wait a minute. It was all around us. You don't even remember Watergate either, firsthand, tangible. I mean, Senator Sam and those hearings were the best reality show in the history of television. I could imitate at least half of those senators by the end of the summer. And Nixon went down.
Yeah.
But now, instead of that prevailing and justice being done, even as back early as Conjure, which is worse than Watergate, you get government dope dealing, assassinations, terror, selling arms to our supposed enemies and saying it's cool because it financed the Contras. That's, it means instead of justice being done long-term, lesson learned, now both Republicans and Democrats and almost any level of government you care to name are one big army of Nixons, basically. Yep. And now, hopping on top of that, when you really think about it in terms of sheer policy, who it has benefited more and more and hurt more and more at the bottom of the pile, it's not left, right, it's not red and blue, it's top attacking the bottom, waging a class war from the top. And basically, let's see if Biden can cut through this, and he's been at times a pleasant surprise. I will give him that. But basically, we have been fed one flavor of Reagan after another since 1980. One flavor of Reagan after another. And that includes Barack Obama in actual policy terms. And Biden may be trying to reverse some of that, but I wonder if how much of the stuff he's proposing about family leave and changing the tax system and everything else, he's proposing knowing it'll never get past McConnell or Joe Manchin or Sinema or any of those corporate weasels. Therefore, I tried to do the right thing. However, I was kind of hoping it would lose.
Yeah.
I hope that I hope he doesn't turn out to be another Gerald Ford. What can I say?
Hello. Listen, Marshall McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions. So he also encouraged people to be pattern recognizers, which you are. You recognize these patterns in the news. You get a big picture comprehensive awareness. But, he also was frustrated because even though we can look to the artist, the lyricist, the painters, the writers to uncover the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, we still ignore them. Why do humans still ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though we can look to the artist to reveal them?
Oh, not conscious of it, comfort level. The increasingly effective effects of advertising, especially when there's product placement in the movies. You got to hold up this Snapple stuff in the reality show because Snapple's a sponsor and stuff like that. So it blurs more and more. So at this point, I don't think anybody should even be allowed to graduate from high school unless they have passed a class on media literacy.
Yeah.
Sharpen those bullshit detectors. Get those antennae out there. Make them longer. Make them smarter. But of course, we don't have classes on bullshit detectors, possibly by design. And so it's up to us to help other people, young and old, around us sharpen their bullshit detectors. And my easy one is, you see something, TV news or something else, you see it on the net, and it's obviously not just obviously false, but so funny, if you can make it funny, that if you point it out to somebody who actually believes what they see on these outlets and get them to laugh, the looking glass is broken. And they will never just automatically believe Fox or CNN or MSNBC or HuffPo or their favorite people's blogs or their friends' gossip on Instagram or whatever automatically ever again. You know, I keep telling people, don't just question authority, question bloggers. Question me.
We
question.
We had a film, Who's Jamming the Culture Jammers? But we're winding down a little.
Major
here,
labels.
Yeah, that's it. We're winding down.
Hollywood.
We got a few more. Jello, how do you find peace of mind?
I'm not sure I ever do. That's not always a good thing. I mean, obviously, there's things like I like getting out of city outdoors at times. I like fucking. I like snuggling up with my cat, who's named Moon Unit, by the way. I think that one's Moon Unit right there. But and she hasn't bombed our entire interview, which is rare for her. But just it's where you find it, basically.
Yeah. And if you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
I'm not sure I'd change a thing, actually, for better or for worse. Just just don't forget your true self and who you are. And so that included, I even though I was really, really hardcore hippie, because that was the way to rebel and freak everybody out until punk happened. But then all of a sudden, some people were not as deeply into that as I was. It was very, very anti-hippie all of a sudden. And the way to shock even that establishment was to chop off your hair really, really short. And I did that at UC Santa Cruz, and suddenly I was felt as dangerous as I did when I first grew my hair out in 6th grade. And I was like, yeah, I like this feeling. It's good to be part of the wave of the next thing that really shocks the fuck out of people. Value and shock value, which is what a lot of good art and literature and journalism is at the end of the day. And so when I'm spacing on the question again, I'm sorry.
You did fine. It's the 12-year-old. So if you
were in 12-year-old, well, that's the other thing is, even though, punk rock, even though I was really, really into that and strutting around with all this, the thrift store shit I'd found and whatnot, even a safety pin or two when I was first in San Francisco, I knew that I still really liked psychedelic music and space rock and the darker side of prog rock like Magma or Il Balletto di Bronzo or some of Zappa's work and whatnot. I that wasn't gone. I wasn't going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. This is just part of me. The part of me that recognized when Klaus, our bassist, was noodling around on the riff that opens Holiday in Cambodia. I thought, wow, what a great riff. That almost seemed like something Hawkwind could do, only if we did it our way and stuff. And this song you guys don't want to play, let's just take the pre-chorus, the chorus, and the bridge that I already brought in, slow it down, make it spookier, and put this in, and voila, the only group-written song in the history of the band, and my favorite to this day, Holiday in Cambodia, was born. There would be no Holiday in Cambodia without Hawkwind. Let's put it that way.
Wow, that's a great story. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
I'm up to my neck in what?
Vomit.
I don't know. If my hands were still free and not covered, I'd cover my face.
Great. That's a great answer.
And because vomit is vomit, but shit has E. coli and stuff in it. Yeah. You'd have to hold your breath and swirl around in the vomit to try and get as much of the shit off as possible. I mean, there's that scene that nobody who saw that movie will ever forget. Oh my God, what's happened to my brain in this interview? It's Spielberg's one about the concentration camps. Schindler's List. Yes, Schindler's List. Liam Neeson, Schindler. Remember the scene where people are hiding, holding their breath under the piss and shit in the toilets to keep from getting killed? If that's the choice, you will do things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, although
Yeah.
the most beautiful scene in that movie, and I'm not rah Spielberg all the way through. Most of those big ones I've never even seen, though, I have to say. I'm just not, I don't follow pop culture at all. I haven't since, I'm not sure I ever have. But the scene where they're walking out of the camp after the war in the black and white movie, and it dissolves to those very real people, the real people the movie is about, as older survivors walking the rest of the way in color. That was a great scene.
Amazing. I'm going to ask you 5 quick questions by Alan Watts. You got to restrict your answer to 3 to 5 words. Really brief.
All right,
Really
we'll see.
Who
I don't have a
started?
Twitter size attention span. I'm
I
sorry.
know, but it's all right. This is just an experiment. You'll find. Who started it all?
Is it fair to think about these questions and then you ask me the ones I can answer and then re-ask the other ones?
Yes, that's fair.
All right, let's have
Everything.
another one.
Are we going to make it?
Like it or not, yes.
Where do we put it?
Put what?
Very
That's my
good.
answer.
Yeah, answering a question with a question. That's what this series is all about.
I
Very
think I'm
good.
going to do the same thing with your first question. So ask
Yeah,
it whenever you want.
Yeah. Who started all? Okay, the next one is we got 2
Oh, I know.
more.
Who started it all? How
Yeah.
do you define it?
It. Very good. Who's cleaning it up?
I hope someone is.
Is it serious?
I got a second answer to that.
Okay, go ahead.
Turn off the faucet. Or piss in, oh, this is 6 words. Piss in your own goddamn jar.
That's great. You can break the rules. There's no rules here. Okay, last one. Is it serious?
Depends on what it is.
Yes, very good. Jello, this has been so much fun. I'm going to ask you one more
I
question.
mean, I know
then
that's kind of a Bill Clinton answer, but it's the right answer.
Dude, it's like, that's fine. There, no, there's no right or wrong answer.
Or what it or multiple itoids are we talking about? I mean, a lot of these answers, it depends on what it is. And in our lives, depending on all your other questions, it changes.
Totally. Everything's in flux. In fact, it's Mother's Day.
It's not a big, beautiful, sunny day anymore. It went dark outside. Aren't you glad I delayed us even further to get these other lights on? Although, oh yeah, there you go. That's even better in a way. Now you can finally see Robbie the werewolf behind me.
Yes, I am very grateful for your time and energy, and I'd love to have another one another time. But I'm going to ask you one more question, then Clinton's going to ask you one, then I'll end it with 2 more.
Thank you, Jerry. It's an honor. I mean, I think you even phoned me years ago wanting to do this on a public stage together.
Oh yeah, we've been trying to do this for years.
And I think we argued over the ticket price because you wanted it higher than I did. And I know my audience and know my market value with that audience.
Listen, I'm glad it happened. And believe me, I want to beat Nadar's record and do this 1,500 times. So here's one more question, then Clinton, and then
don't keep me on Zoom for 6 hours the way he did last time.
Right.
The new Nardwar thing is in 3 parts. And a lot of it is him freaking out because his Zoom shit kept crapping out.
I know. It's we just got to cope with the Zoom crap. Here's the question. Joseph Boyce said, make the secrets productive. Lou Welsh, beat poet, said, guard the secrets, constantly reveal them. But it was Thornton Wilder in 28. He said, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But it's not, art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. So you've laid your cards on the table for 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't. What's it really all about for you, Jello?
I can't answer that in a sound bite
No, you don't. No,
or
this
even
is no
5
longer
words.
soundbite. No, this is no longer soundbite. That other thing was the 5 Alan Watts questions. This one is just suss it out. What's it really all about for you? Yeah, I'm not asking
Well,
for a sound.
again, trying to answer that question, I'd have to comb through my whole life, which we did in small snippets and stuff, because
Yeah.
that always changes. That
But
that
your
would
hunt.
require, the print volume of the Encyclopedia Britannica to be the intro and forward alone. I hope I never find out what it's all about.
Well, that's perfect answer. That's like I didn't ask you,
I almost had to go to my oblique strategies cards. You know what those are, right?
No, I look at. I want to tell you
You
something.
do or you don't?
No, you can. You can do
Well, these are
whatever you want.
great. These are great. It's some of what you're talking about. Brian Eno and an artist, I think his name was Peter Schmidt, put these out in limited edition early on, and maybe the Roxy Music days. A limited number were made, and I actually traded a bunch of really nice vinyl to get one of these. But it's a very interesting device. Oblique Strategies is a deck of cards, which is all black on one side. And the idea being you come to a point of crossroads, being stuck, indecision in your life, you pull out a card and see if it breaks the stuff in your brain. This one just says, into the impossible.
That's perfect.
And here's another one. Do the words need changing? A little more, practical, work-oriented? Maybe. I mean, I found when I actually use these, which I keep forgetting, but they're really ghost echoes. There's another one.
Yeah.
So basically, it's a really, really cool device. And one more reason to thank Brian Eno for his brain, being willing to share his brain with the rest of us in so many ways all these years. But for me, I found that if they really do like kind of jar things and suddenly maybe there's a log jam goes or whatever, sometimes it's when I might get out one, I don't like that one. I get out 2 or 3 and then lay them out and then leave them there for a little bit. And then maybe something starts to happen. It can sometimes be a tool even for depression too.
Yeah. Well, Jello, it actually
I thought sure you'd know what this was. This seemed like something
I'm glad you
all about.
I'm glad you taught me, because Eno said a great line trying to sell McLuhan's book. He said he changed the world with a sentence. But I wanted to bring up, you conjured up this quickie little thing. And T.S. Eliot said that poetry is outing your inner dialogue. And so I asked this great experimental filmmaker in New York, Abigail Child, I says, what language is your inner dialogue in? And she goes, I wish I knew.
Oh my God. You know why that's funny? Is I had a geometry teacher in my sophomore year in high school who had the same accent as the Fargo movie, and indescribably odd dude, even before things started happening. Like, now we're talking about the angle C-A-B. Excuse me, B. Angle A-D. Boy, am I having a time today. And it grew and it grew and it grew. And me and another friend in an earlier class period started writing down his quotes. And I still have a notebook. It's that thick to this day. Who needs the little red book or Gaddafi's little green book or whatever when you have these? And can you open it up and see how he's trying to say congruent triangles? Now, we working with, and this is a guy with, even in the 70s, baggy Charlie Chaplin pants, a white shirt, and a skinny black tie with a flannel hunting shirt or something on top of it, and a little turtly head and wavy widow's peak hair and glasses and that Fargo movie accent. And that the congruent triangles one fine day became, and he always had a silver chalk holder with his chalk clear out here. He'd write, now We working with Klangagi troubers. No, 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 no. Congruent triangles, sanguine triangles, congruent where was there? Excuse me, Oh, yes, triangulars. No, tringlers. Oh, no, triangulars. Oh, I can't even try. Then he went through phases where Freudian slips about food would come in and out, sex, and Watergate. But then there was another one where he got stumbled on something because some of his stuff is just, it's part of my vernacular now. It's something you think about from time to time. Kind of like some of the great lines of Wesley Willis, too. But,
Yes. Oh, my God.
But
that was so great that you released Wesley Willis.
Oh, I know. I mean, that I think I'm proudest of that of all alternative tentacles is the Wesley Willis stuff.
That's
and whatnot.
amazing.
Oh,
so
yeah,
let's
this dude
just
you went to high school with hangs out with, plays golf with Bill Clinton. Yeah, but I had Wesley Willis as a house guest several times, and this is some of the stuff he did, and blah, blah, blah. Oh, I miss that man. But anyway, back to the geometry teacher. Once he finally got flustered, at one point, he started talking in his own language completely and asked the class, Ober die Ampus blabby twerp. And there was some more like that. But then one day, he was flustered on some equation. I can't remember the rest of this quote because he was bumbling words. Then, oh, Geely Wheelie, why can't? I wish I knew where Yab. So some people are like, well, what about this? What do we do? I wish I knew. Well, how do we get to this place? I wish I knew. And the other great one like that of his was, wait, maybe so. Probably not. Oh, well. I mean, you can say that for all kinds of things, too.
He seems to be conjuring up what James Joyce did in Finnegan's Wake. So, Clinton, why don't you come on and ask your question and thank Clinton for getting all these buttons working. This was really fun.
Thank you for your patience here.
Glad that was awesome.
You know, I do all these podcasts now, partly because of COVID and partly because we're not playing live. And I have this new product to promote. Once again, yes, it's even better than sawing a boat in half. It's even better than shades where you can see eagles when you put them on. It's even better than being able to cook rocks in a frying pan if you're that high on drugs. It's Jello Biafra, the Untitled School of Medicine's Tea Party Revenge Porn album. You will not be disappointed.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's awesome. I love the point you made about the censorship of like the realities, the grisly realities of stuff that used to be, say, on the news that you don't see anymore. Because like that's like that story you told about watching the news change is exactly what it's like growing up on the internet, watching like the horrible shit that's going on now, and now the whitewashed, like social media, everything has to be squeaky clean and message controlled, or right, like it's the same vibe over and over again. That's insane. But like, how do you?
I'm glad I didn't have a safe space from that gnarly fucking shit when it was all on the news and stuff.
That's it. Exactly.
I may have seen the initial night when John Lewis got attacked by the dogs and beaten in Selma. I know I saw Selma footage from time to time on the news. And of course, it made me just vehemently anti-racist and pro-civil rights and understanding what it all meant at a very early age.
Yeah. What do you do with these people who feel entitled to the emotional security all the time, and then who steal legitimate causes for their own, narcissism?
I don't know whether it's their own narcissism. I think you're trying to get into safe spaces and microaggressions.
Well,
and now we got to cancel this.
That's just one tiny corner of it. That's one tiny corner, right? But
I know I'm walking a tightrope here, and at some point there's going to be a song about this shit, but I'm not quite sure how I'm going to say it yet, because if it is something that's going to trigger horrible PTSD in somebody in the middle of a college classroom, that is legit. However, if it's something that may only trigger something in one person, then I don't know whether you should have trigger warnings or deprive everybody else in the class of being educated about that stuff. That's where I draw the line. As far as I'm concerned, okay, just be ready, because I am one big macroaggression of whatever I feel like fucking with you over, because this is punk fucking rock.
Hell yeah, man. Like, how does, like, subcultures are like their own private world, and your subculture is like hardcore in that regard. So it's like, how
I
how
am
does
part of many cultures.
yeah.
That's what I was trying to say earlier, is I never shed any of the earlier parts of my being in that regard. I just added to them.
Yeah, in fact, Andrew McLuhan is Marshall's grandson. We know him, and he's really carrying on the tradition. And he was a punk rocker. And after one of after one of his shows, he looks down in the mosh pit, and there's a copy of Understanding Media on the floor.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
there you go.
So
you just never know how you're going to affect people like that. I mean, before all the selfie stuff started, people wanting stuff signed, and then if people had slivers of paper or nothing else, like a little weird. But the one that meant more to me than anybody wanting that was when they'd come up to me and say, yeah, your stuff really influenced me, and this is what I've made. Here's my record. This is something I wrote. You helped trigger my wanting to use my law degree to help people and not just screw people. Or you've influenced how I teach high school history and stuff like that. That's the kind of really cool payback.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
That I kind of have to live up to, too.
Yeah. Well, you have done it well. And we got 2 more questions to close out. Thank you. What's the healthiest or most impactful cultural shift you see developing today?
I would say, well, I sure like what the TikTok kids did to Trump in Tulsa. New ways of pulling pranks, even when there's so many cameras everywhere and stuff. I mean, there's another one I think I talk about in my own interview in Pranks Volume 1, is the day that we were supposed to rehearse, Ted Kennedy's was across from San Francisco in the East Bay. And then Ray called me and said, look, we can't practice today. The bridge is totally shut down. There's traffic jams spilling out of there, even clogging up downtown San Francisco, downtown Oakland, whatever, because something got spilled in the bridge that morning. And they just stopped it immediately because they didn't know what it was. They had to get the hazmat crew out and get every last granule of what could have been PCBs or worse, or even plutonium dust or something off the bridge, following procedure and following the correct procedure. Although tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people never made it to work that day. And thus costing lots of corporations we know and love. After all, the headquarters of what was then Bank of America was downtown San Francisco, Chevron, Bechtel, all this other stuff and more stuff in Oakland. All this company time and company money was lost because this one barrel of white powder fell off a truck. And they finally get it to a lab, and after looking for all these chemicals, they finally look and conclude that it was flour. I have wondered ever since if that whole thing was intentional.
And it is like a training. It's a training exercise on how to fuck shit up.
Oh yeah,
we do that.
I mean, there's still people who will dress up in billboard sign people and get up on those billboards and change the billboard to something else. And it may stay up for a while that way too. If you get the right thing that'll shock and educate people quick as they're driving by, you've accomplished a lot.
Yep. Culture jamming works. We know that. So last question, Jello. It's been such a delight, and we appreciate all your music and words. What gives you the most optimism?
What gives me the most optimism? Boy, I think I'm going to quote Václav Havel. I am not optimistic, but I have hope.
Nice.
Not that it gets used as a manipulative tool by hope dope dealers like deodorant manufacturers, preachers for profit, Bill Clinton hyping himself as the man from Hope when he mostly grew up in Hot Springs, which was a mob resort, or of course Obama and the Hope poster, which is then parodied by Shepard Fairey himself on Guantanamo School of Medicine's Audacity of Hype debut album. I called him, since we're friends, I'm going to make fun of your poster. And he said, oh, who's going to do the art? I don't know yet. Well, I want to do it. That was a lot of fun.
That's good. Yeah, making fun of yourself is good. Jello, thanks again for this. Clinton, thanks again. Jello Biafra, keep making your music and keep talking. I hope we can return again and talk more someday.
And remember, boys and girls, a prank a day keeps the dog leash away.